Good morning. The Ministry of External Affairs said yesterday that disengagement in Ladakh will be a very long process because the Chinese have gone back on the commitment they made at the special representative talks. The reality is that China has managed to outsmart India because they take a long term view of things. Now, to understand that, I'll take viewers to the two line of actual control which existed in Ladakh. Let me start with the Indian line of actual control, which is very well documented in a book called Choices by former National Security Advisor Shiv Shankar Menon. Menon is the person who proposed this idea, and he's also the person who pushed and saw this idea, fructification of this idea. Now, what is the idea? The idea was that on the coming visit of Prime Minister Narasimha Rao to China, the Indian side proposed to China that we do not have a boundary between us. What we have is an open border. Why not sign an agreement of peace? And that agreement will be around a line of peace or a line of tranquility. And this line will be which is being physically held at that time by both the sides. Now, the Chinese said this is a good idea, except they said, rather, Menon tells us, they insisted that instead of calling this line of peace or line of tranquility, it should be called line of actual control. And the reason they gave was that in November 1959, in the letter that Prime Minister Chow En-lai wrote to Premier Nehru as part of his proposal of a package deal for the border resolution, this term line of actual control was used in that official document. And this line of control at that time, the map grid references were well marked, which means it was delimited from the Chinese side. So they said, why not use this? Indian side said, all right, we can use this because it was reasoned here that the Chinese attach a lot of symbolism to these things, to their old things. Let's call it that. Nobody here realized that when you call something line of actual control, it has a serious military connotation. But the Indian side was thinking, and this is something they put in the draft, which was being exchanged to and fro between the two capitals, that before the agreement is signed, the delimitation and the demarcation by the both sides, which is agreement on the map, agreement on the ground, will be done. Now here again, the Chinese diplomats, they came back saying that the PLA is not agreeable to this. And to get the PLA on board will take a lot of time, and it will not be possible to sign the agreement during the visit of Prime Minister Rao to China. They knew very well that the Indians have a problem, and the problem is that whenever an Indian Prime Minister goes to China, he must come back and show some big achievement, and he must show that he did one better than his predecessor. So, they got it right. The Indian side said, all right, we will sign the agreement, but after the agreement, we'll have a joint group which will decide the delimitation and the demarcation of this line of actual control. And the Chinese said yes. Now, all the agreements, peace agreements and protocols, which is the 1993, 1996, 2003, 2005, 2012, 2013, they all have been signed around this line of actual control. And it is this line of actual control, a few days back, the Ministry of External Affairs clearly said is understood by the Indian side, and the Indian Army never violates it. This is the line that the Indian Army has been holding as its own territory for the last 27 years. Now, this is the line that when the crisis happened, they have just rubbished it, the PLA, and they have walked through this westward. Right from the entire arc, the eastern Ladakh arc, starting Depsang, Galwan, Gogra, Hot Springs, Pangam So, Demchok, they have shifted it westwards. And what they are saying now at the negotiations is that we have no problems at all with the 1993 peace agreement, which was mutually agreed by the both sides. But we do not recognize the line of actual control of that time because it was never agreed. So the only agreed line or the only documented line, what they are saying, is the claim line of 1959, which was mentioned in the letter by Chow and Lai to Nehru. And hence, all these protocols that I just mentioned, peace protocols, they should now be around this claim line of 1959, which is documented. In other words, the Chinese say we will not vacate the territory where we have already come in, because their argument is that all these years the Indian army was nibbling at their territory. It was taking it slowly, and now we have stopped that. Now, here is the problem. The problem is, how can India accept that PLA takes so much of our territory, which since 1993, then we were physically holding at that time, and we have patrolled, we have always thought this was our land. How can you trade so much of land for peace is a problem. And the Chinese are going one step further and saying that, hey, look, Prime Minister Modi, in his statement that he made on June 19, he said that nobody has intruded in our territory. So this is where the talks are stuck. And there is a stalemate, there is an impasse. Very difficult to move forward. Now, there are a lot of veterans, there are a lot of senior officers, very senior officers who have commanded in that area. Now, what they are saying is that it should not be indefinite. We have today a capability, and the capability they are referring to is that something, when this crisis started about after 5th of May, a lot of troops from outside also have been inducted. Some 2 divisions, according to reports, are inducted in Ladakh itself. So in Ladakh, given that there was an existing division, there are today a total of 3 divisions, and there are 2 armored brigades, according to these generals, veterans. And plus, of course, there is the Brigade Plus, which looks after Siachen. So there are a lot of forces in being. And similarly, a lot of troops have been inducted in the western and the middle sector also. Something like, roughly people are saying about 200,000 soldiers have been brought in all along the line of actual control. So the argument being made is that we know from our previous knowledge where are the vulnerabilities of the PLA, of the Chinese. So we should do a counter-attack there. We should occupy that territory and then use it as a bargaining chip for a quid pro quo. You return our territory in Ladakh and we will release this territory. So this sounds great. The problem is it is suicidal, and this is what I want to explain now. Let me start by saying that all these troops, first of all, which have been inducted in the theatre in Ladakh and elsewhere along the line of actual control. You see, now we are talking of end of July. By end of September, at least insofar as Ladakh is concerned, there are only 2 passes. There is Rohtang and there is Jojila. They close because of heavy snow. Now we are talking of average heights of 15,000 feet. That is what we are talking of. Once they are completely closed, there is a requirement to do the winter stocking because they don't open until March. 6-7 months they are not available. That entire area is cut off. Ladakh is cut off. So the winter stocking has to be done. Not only for the existing soldiers, troops, but also for the additional soldiers. Now this is where the Indian Air Force also is putting in a lot of air effort. And thankfully we have bought a lot of big aircraft, transport aircraft, which are helping in this endeavor. So all this talk of about, Indian Air Force doing some training or moving aircrafts to their forward bases is nothing more than a public relation exercise, because this is where the effort has to be put in. Not only that, the other problem is that the soldier has to be made comfortable also at that altitude. He needs high altitude clothing. He needs Arctic tents, because he will be there for a very long duration, perhaps permanently, most of them. Then, as I remember of my own experience of 78, 79, my experience of being at Sela Pass is just about 10,000 feet. It used to be said that, what you need is there, tel pani hawa. Now, this is no joke. What is tel? Tel is the fuel. You need diesel for the vehicles. You need kerosene to keep the soldiers warm. Right now, they'll be supplied in jerry cans. I mean, like in Siachen today, we have pipelines laid down there. Perhaps here, considering once they finally rationalize how many troops stay here, the army stays here, they'll make this sort of a provision. They'll replicate perhaps the Siachen model here. This has to be done. So this is a big effort. Then the second I said is pani. Water is a very big thing. Because of this height, everything freezes. The pipes burst. Water is a scarcity. How to provide the water? That is a big thing. And another third big thing is hawa, the rarefied air. You see, in the fast changing weather, that plays havoc with electronic equipment. And I'm giving all these tactical details for the simple reason to give a sense of the enormity of the problem, all that has to be done even before we start thinking of operation. So, you see, at that rarefied air, we have found always, because we don't have even today the fiber optic cables laid down in that area, because that area was never given any prominence. In fact, if I may digress and say, it was only after the present Chief General Naravane took over. I remember at his first press conference in January this year, he said very categorically, having served in the Eastern Command, that we need to pay attention to this, and it should be equal attention to the Pakistan and the Chinese side. But then, of course, CDS Rawat, as we know, is a counter-terror expert. So we don't know, no importance was given to this area at all. Now, coming back, so you see, at that temperature and at that weather, there is a problem with the vehicles. You see, the engines, because of rarefied air, they get overheated. The pipes connecting the vehicles, they crack. This happens. Then it is very normal at that altitude, and given our very poor infrastructure and the increased density of troops now, that there will be a lot of convoys will be delayed. In fact, even at that time, there used to be a standard SOP in that area, that anybody who is traveling in a convoy needs to carry his own dry rations, his food for survival, because one never knew when the person will reach the destination. Then all these forces which have come from outside, they were on the planes, WEs, war establishment tables, holdings were of the planes. Now that has to be converted to the mountains. So they need that equipment. Then that equipment has to be recalibrated for accurate firing. You see, all these things in the last 3 years, the PLA has already done, because they've been sitting there since 2017. So then we do not have an industrial base unlike the PLA. So already the government has given the emergency powers of 300 crores to the 3 service chiefs. Now they are trying to buy the ammunition, they are trying to buy the bombs, the missiles, all this is being bought now. So you see, this is all the priority. So everything, what is the priority? The first priority is the winter stocking, creating a habitat, creating a reasonable ecosystem for the troops which have been inducted. And if the Chinese PLA took 3 years to do all that, minimum we'll take is 6 months. So we cannot be thinking of operations today. Now, coming to the operations. First of all, you see, what happens is, it's a very normal practice. I'm not giving out any secret here, that There are old plans, operational plans, perhaps of the 70s or the 80s. So any new commander who comes in that area, they always see the existing plans and then they upgrade the plans. A consequence of that is that the focus has always remained only on the land warfare. It is in the land warfare, even against the Chinese, that the Indian army and the generals, they talk of the tactical level of war, the operational level of war. Good Lord, all that has changed with the PLA. For PLA, that is only one tactical domain. That is tactics. The entire land is tactics. For them, the war means synergy of the other domains also, which is cyber. I have said in my other videos before. There are so many domains that they'll work on. And what we have to keep at the back of mind is there are two specialized organizations which they have created. They have created the Rocket Force. Then they have created the Strategic Support Force. Rocket Force is missiles. And they have very formidable missiles here. You see, the Indian Air Force still will not have once it is through with the operational effort that it is putting in, they would actually be thinking how to take on this rocket force, how to take on their missiles, how to take on their combat drones. Indian military doesn't have any combat drones. So, and then as I said, there is the Strategic Support Force. There is the cyber. I've spoken about this in my earlier video. Then the Chinese are very good in the electronic warfare, in the domination of the electromagnetic spectrum. So you see, this is where they'll fight the war. And the problem doesn't end here. If we start any ingress at any place, rest be assured, especially after 5th of August of last year, I say that there is no longer a two-front war. There is a reinforced one-front war. And the interoperability between the PLA and the Pakistan military has been going on since 2011 between the air forces and the land forces in this area only in Ladakh. And mind you, it's not symbolic. At this, after so many years, they would be talking of advanced exercises together. You see, a reinforced one-front war is what, I'm not saying it will happen, but you start that, this is assured. This is what I'm saying. You see, so, and special emphasis, whatever the reports come out, the two sides, they always give in the electromagnetic spectrum, in electronic warfare. And this is not really the strength of the Indian military. So, that opens up. Along with that, there is another front, Kashmir. The Kashmiris, the valley. You see, the peacetime arrangement is that the Northern Army commander, he's the dual hatter. He looks after both the CI ops, which is where he focuses, usually, and then he has the war plans. Now, how can he just now get on with the war plan? Then what happens here with the CI ops? Because the Indian Army never bothered all these years to give up CI ops and hand over this counter-terror stuff to the paramilitary forces and the state police. So you see, things open at a multi-front. The moment we decide to fire one shot, this is what the situation will be. Now, the problem here is that if they stay here very long, which they will, you see, as the indications are coming, then there are 5 more issues that come up. The first issue is the image of India takes a knock in the neighborhood, because the entire neighborhood is watching. We have seen Nepal, we have seen Bhutan for the first time. Bhutan for the first time actually has become vocal and said that yes, they are looking for border talks with China. Never happened before. Number 2, the costs for the Indian Army have been raised substantially by this Ladakh crisis. Hugely. You see, and this will impact the military modernization also. Number 3, as I said, both the fronts are live. Now, the line of actual control is live and the line of control was always live. Number 4, after June 15, what happened in Galwan, the Galwan killings, it can no longer be policing. You see, the Indian Army will have to prepare for or to mentally be ready for the border guarding, which means that it goes up, the problem goes up. You see, for the Indian army. And number 5, insofar as the PLA is concerned, I mean, this is a great opportunity for them, sitting there with their excellent ISR, to see all the Indian Army activities. This is information about our deployments, our mobilizations, how we are bringing the operational logistics. This is information, valuable information for their future war. So the point I'm making is that it is an extremely difficult catch-22 situation. Thank you so much. My request, which I make every time, is that if you like this video, please do subscribe. This is free. Thank you very much.